Well, we do have a good topic. You know, it struck me that we've already been talking this morning about artificial intelligence and technology and its impact on the industry. And I noticed if you look at the agenda, it will be coming up in later panels. So it's top of mind, certainly for regulators and the industry. And it impacts, our daily lives more and more. So we need to also think about the risks that come with that, the risk of malware attacks, phishing, ransomware, and just your standard data breaches. It's something that, again, is in this ever-evolving landscape is becoming more of a concern. So effective cybersecurity is all the more critical when you talk about processes and just best practices so we can deal with that. So we are going to have a great discussion with Anthony. He's an expert in this field, and we're going to really walk through kind of the evolution of cybersecurity, the current landscape, and how effective cybersecurity processes can help mitigate some of the harms that he will identify. So I'm going to turn it over to you now. Let me start off with, my understanding is you've been in this field, cybersecurity policy, since the early 2000s. Let's talk about the evolution of cybersecurity and start with, looking at the actors, right? Whether it's nation states or hacktivas, is that the right way to pronounce it? You can correct me if I'm wrong, or other organizations. What are we seeing, and what's the impact on organizations and industries like insurance?
Sure. So thanks for having me today. In the back, if you can't hear me, just wave your hands. I'm a little soft-spoken. But Scott teed up a great question. He talked about my background in the industry since the early 2000s. That is correct. I will also admit that I've actually been doing this my entire life, having started working in cybersecurity at the young age of 10 years old when I hacked my first computer. And I tell you that not to brag, but to tell you how, as Scott asked, how the industry has evolved. Because back then, when I started professionally as an ethical hacker, computer hackers, they used to try to break infrastructure. They would try to look at an organization, look at the equipment used, and try to break that equipment. Therefore bypassing controls and technologies to get in and create havoc within that organization. The actor TTPs, tools, techniques, and protocols have changed over the years. And believe it or not, rather than try to break equipment and break into infrastructure, actors now just simply ask people for their passwords. And people give them to them. Just earlier today, I was working a case where a Fortune 100 organization was compromised because somebody gave their password to a threat actor. So what we're seeing is, of course, an uptick in social engineering to gain access to this infrastructure and to wreak havoc. But in years past, in my days during government, when investigating these threat actors, they were motivated by primarily two things. Money, right? Does everybody remember Willie Sutton? Willie Sutton was the first person on the FBI's most wanted list. When finally the FBI arrested him, they said, "Willie, why do you keep robbing the banks?" And he said, "Of course, that's where the money is." So money, financially motivated actors. And then the second group of actors we saw were nation-state actors conducting espionage. That has changed, okay? And one of the first things Commissioner White said to me when I walked in and we said hello before this lecture is he said, typically this group focuses on physical threats. And I can appreciate that. Physical things happening, you can see it, you can feel it. It creates this disruption that consumers and we all can see and feel. Cyber isn't necessarily that way. Things are happening in cyberspace affecting people in this room right now that you don't even know about, right? So what we're seeing is an evolution from financially motivated actors or nation states conducting espionage to now people looking to create disruption. Take systems down, take systems offline. And then what we're also seeing, and I'm sure folks in this room can appreciate, is misinformation. The evolution and the large-scale misinformation or influence campaigns that we've been witnessing or experiencing over the last decade, and that continues to rise.
That's very good. So let's move on to some of the challenges, and I'm sure we could talk about this a lot, but let's just touch on what you view as some of the biggest challenges when it comes to cybersecurity policy, and we'll kind of divide it into, governments and then organizations.
Yeah, so it's a great question. People ask me this all the time. And so when I worked in government, I was an FBI agent in the field in New York City. And I spent a lot of my time interfacing with organizations that were victims of cybercrime. After my time in New York City in the field, I came to Washington, where I worked at the national level, at the federal level, in the FBI headquarters building, but then also down the street at the White House for the Obama and Trump administration. The number one common question we would get from victims of cybercrime is, okay, what do we do next, right? And that is a question that still stands true today. It's not clear. It's not clear. So now in private practice, most of the time I'm engaging with outside counsel and helping organizations navigate what to do next. A cyber breach is something we hear about every day in the news, okay? And typically what we hear about in the news is that immediate incident, that first 3 months. What most folks don't realize, unless they've experienced it themselves, is once that immediate 3 months, that exciting part is over, that incident has a tail that can last for years, sometimes 5, 10 years, and typically involves a price tag of north of $50 to $100 million, depending on the size of your organization. And because of that, and because of affected consumers, what we see, for better or worse, depending on how you look at it, is a bunch of different regulations, both at the federal level and at the state level, in which these organizations need to adhere to in response to a cyber incident. It's not clear. I'm not going to sit before you right after lunch as a cybersecurity expert and tell you it's clear. It's not. It's clear as mud, and it's very complicated, and it's something that I do believe needs work. It's just a matter of us getting our lawmakers to fully appreciate what's involved and the burden it does place on organizations.
Yeah, one thing I notice when you read about this and you pay attention is how quickly things are changing in a kind of an accelerated environment, which makes the need to adapt your cybersecurity policies so important, and particularly when you're talking about these AI-driven attacks. And I'm assuming that's a whole new frontier. How do you look at that?
So you're absolutely right. I work with organizations every single day in private practice. When I was in government, I served as a government official, helping work with them, connect them with the right people. Now in private practice, I'm doing it as one of those advisors, helping these organizations. I've seen organizations spend as much as $500 million a year in cybersecurity defenses. That's astronomical, okay? And as you can appreciate, that's probably Fortune 10, Fortune 5. And you might expect that for some organizations. The reason why I tell you that is to set the stage and to say that that organization can invest that much money and they still have hundreds, if not thousands, of incidents a year. Now, anyone who tells you they can prevent a cyber incident is lying to you. And I'm allowed to tell you that because I've been doing this my entire life. There's no way to prevent an incident. And especially as I sit before all of you, I'm sure you're all sitting there saying, of course, that's why we're in this industry. Right? To mitigate risk, to identify risk and help make that risk smaller. So the adoption of AI, it's very exciting. We're going to see incredible things come out of it. In this industry especially, things that are going to make our jobs that much easier, faster. We're going to be able to identify risk or compliance that much quicker and easier. However, the threat actors are going to be doing the same exact thing. They're going to be using AI to craft emails that are going to socially engineer people that much faster. They're going to be using AI to analyze code to find exploits that they would have never found but for the use of that new tool that is freely available to everybody. So it's a long way of saying buckle up. It's going to get exciting.
Yeah, that sounds very challenging, and it just emphasizes the need for, when you're talking about implementing a cyber resilience policy. As you look at it, what to you are the must-haves if you're going to implement, a robust, effective cyber security policy, enterprise policy?
So it's an interesting question. I get it all the time. The first thing I do is ask an organization to look internally first. What is most important to you? right? Sometimes, when I give lectures like this, I draw upon my actual practical experiences in the field, both as a government official and also in private practice. Think about your organization. One organization I've worked with to help them develop their plans was a massive clear defense contractor building the next generation of weapons for the United States government. That is going to need a pretty intense cyber resilience strategy. Another organization I worked was actually down the street from that clear defense contractor, and their primary mission was to make popcorn. I'm not joking. So their cyber resilience strategy is going to be a little bit different. So what's important is to look internally, find out what's most important to you. And remember, I talked about that organization that had the $500 million budget? That's astronomical. And an organization cannot and should not be expected to invest that much money every single year. And so you have to develop that strategy. Find out the governance structure of your organization and how you want to be organized. Figure out what's most important to your business operations. Is it your manufacturing? Is it your intellectual property? Is it consumer data? Right? You have to figure out what's most important, and should there be an incident, what is going to be most scary for you all? Okay? Build best practices defense around that. This is not a discipline that you are going to say, okay, here's our roadmap, and that roadmap draws us out for the next 2 years, and then we're done. No. Once you finish that roadmap, you're going to have to develop another roadmap. You're going to have to keep going. You're not looking to prevent risk. You're looking to make sure that when incident or when risk occurs, it's very small. Everybody knows about ransomware. Ransomware is running rampant today, okay? Billions of dollars is being spent every single year. Even the U.S. government has made the statement. Everybody knows Colonial Pipeline. The U.S. government has said the way they viewed ransomware was before Colonial Pipeline and after Colonial Pipeline. After Colonial Pipeline, the entire U.S. government sat up and took notice and said, this is a significant national security threat. You're never going to prevent ransomware from happening. But my advice to you, and if you follow the advice of me and my colleagues, it is going to be to make sure those incidents are much smaller. Rather than your entire organization being hit, maybe just a single department or a small group, a small team, 10, 12 people are compromised. That's the way you need to be thinking about this stuff. And putting this governance structure, these policies in place, documenting it, and then practicing. If you haven't done a cyber incident response exercise in the last year, it's time to do it.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of us in our own departments face cyber risks, and the question I have, I guess, gets towards sustainability. Of, you can come in and get very excited and understand the risk and hear from you, but over the course of a year or two, do you see a mix of organizations that kind of fall off a little bit in terms of continuing the practices they need to have that cybersecurity enterprise in place?
Yeah, I mean, the reality is people get complacent. Remember I spoke about when we started, you can't see it, so people think, okay, it's covered. Right? Everybody works in an organization, big or small. If you're sitting in your chair right now thinking, I don't need to worry about this. I have a chief information security officer. You're wrong. You're wrong. Almost every single incident I've worked involves someone in the organization who is simply just staff, just trying to do their job, right? Everybody is thinking, I'm overworked, I'm underpaid, underappreciated. I just got to get this last email out so I can start my long weekend. And they send the email, and what they didn't realize is they were engaging with a threat actor. It's a team sport. Everybody's involved. Everybody plays a critical role. Think of your chief information security officer or your chief information officer or your chief security officer. Think of them as your goalie, right? Your last stop effort. They've got all the tools and all the fancy widgets to help make sure stuff doesn't happen, but everybody plays a critical role.
Yeah, that's very helpful. Why don't we spend a few minutes talking about particular threats? We've been looking more and more at cloud threats, and I mentioned what you're seeing in the cloud space. We're increasingly looking at third-party security, including in the cloud. So what threats should we be considering there?
So I'm a big fan of the cloud. I think it can make organizations very efficient, significant cost savings. But you know what it doesn't do is it doesn't reduce risk. In some cases, it actually can create more risk. So a couple of ways to think about the cloud. Yes, it's efficient. Yes, efficient not only in you can use more efficient resources, but you don't actually have to have the physical space. You don't have to worry about the physical security aspect of it. But just because you can't see it doesn't mean you're not responsible for it. Almost every single incident I work involves people leveraging cloud infrastructure but not realizing just because I'm leveraging one of the big players, Amazon, Microsoft, Google, doesn't mean I've transferred the risk from me to them. Sure, there's risk that they are accepting responsibility for, but most of the risk stays with you. So misconfigurations are a big issue. We left infrastructure completely wide open, and we didn't realize it until after all the data was gone. Transferring that ownership, thinking this is not my problem anymore, Amazon is now responsible for it. Absolutely not. And then, of course, there's with people using more cloud resources, there's also the invitation of third-party risk. Now, we talked about cloud infrastructure like Amazon, Microsoft, and Google, but what about other cloud providers? MoveIt. Is everybody familiar with the MoveIt data breach? That was a cloud provider, third party, that said, yes, we will host your data, we will keep it safe and secure, but there was a vulnerability in their system. And not only did that threat actor compromise MoveIt, but they compromised all their clients. That is a new trend we're seeing at nation-state level threat actors. Why target a single organization when we can target the provider, the cloud provider, of hundreds, if not thousands of organizations? Professional services are targets, right? Law firms, consulting firms, special interest groups, any provider, any large, any organization that hosts and is responsible for large quantities of sensitive data is at risk. So there are risks and rewards. I'm sorry, I'm doing all the talking here.
No, that's why we're here. Turning from the cloud, we're also focused on innovative approaches by the industry. We want to encourage those because it benefits consumers in a lot of ways. But again, we need to look at the risks and make sure we understand those. We're looking at insurance products increasingly being connected to what we call the Internet of Things, a term I'm sure you're familiar with, physical devices that may have sensors or software connectivity that enables data exchanges. So explain to us how the data is vulnerable and how we should look at these, how they should be defended.
Yeah, so this is actually a topic I'm pretty passionate about because I've been sort of waving my arms about this for the last 15 years. I remember when I was in government, everybody was focused on SCADA. SCADA, it's the big commercial supervisory control systems that, may regulate the water supply to communities. And don't get me wrong, I believe that is very important and we should not take our eye off the ball, but there was a hidden threat on the horizon that I didn't think was getting enough attention, and that's the Internet of Things. There was some policy pushed out of the White House over the last, let's say, just few administrations promoting more interconnectivity around the world, really, and especially around the country and rural areas, which is a great thing. I mean, I wasn't joking when I said I started at a very young age in this industry, very passionate about this. So I love the fact that more homes will be connected to the Internet. And then I love the fact that more manufacturers are creating more devices that are connected to the Internet. I read a statistic the other day, like the average person has 3 phones. If you think about it, 3 phones. Those are 3 devices connected to the Internet today. And a super cool fun fact are the phones today. I have one in my pocket. This phone in my pocket is as powerful as a computer server 15 years ago, which is fascinating. So think about that. 15 years ago is just as powerful as this phone today. So someone walking around with 3 of those. So it's a long way of saying it's a really exciting time, and all these devices connected are going to provide us with amazing benefits. However, as your risk management individual on stage, I have to remind you, there's going to be a lot of risk associated with that. What are those risks? One, they can be hijacked and used by malicious actors to do whatever else. Anyone ever heard of a botnet? A botnet is an army of computers used to conduct a larger attack on an organization, to shut down an organization. How do you trace a botnet back to somebody? You don't. Or you can, it just takes a lot of work, but usually it's millions of small devices used to facilitate that attack. So these small IoT devices could be used to launch an attack. These small devices may also be weaponized, used by a threat actor to collect information. And so you think about it, perhaps an organization wants to plug in little devices in your car that'll track your GPS location, your speed, right? Other critical data about the vehicle so it can help the consumer get a better insurance rate, or maybe a worse insurance rate because they drive erratically. That's very valuable and certainly going to help the industry. But what if a third-party threat actor compromises that infrastructure and now has insights into all the cars, where they're going, all that digital data, all that data it's collecting, and is weaponizing that or abusing that data and now launching attacks against those human beings, those people. Those are risks that we see every single day, and those are the risks that we are hoping people come to us and we talk through, because that's what's happening. It's happening right now as we sit in this room. There are threat actors targeting Amazon Alexa, right, your Google Home devices. And people think like, oh, you know, what's there to worry about? There's a lot to worry about if we all go home and televisions don't work, or our lights won't turn on because our home is interconnected with Internet of Things devices.
Very good. I know everybody in the room is asking me, when are you going to ask them about Change Healthcare? Because that was a big topic for us last year, and it was a clearinghouse for healthcare providers and insurers, and ransomware attack that had cascading effects throughout the system, and we're still dealing with that today. So I'm assuming you're familiar with it. What can you tell us about ransomware attacks, and what are you seeing in terms of the level of sophistication around those?
So ransomware, believe it or not, ransomware has been around for about 20 years. And it was after Colonial Pipeline when the United States government sat up and took notice and said, we need to do something about this. And they've done incredible work. Excuse me, don't get me wrong, but there's always more to do, because as much as we, as America and as our government work together with private and public organizations to have a policy against ransomware, the ransomware actors are just doing their thing. They're finding those exploits, they're finding those weak individuals, those weakest links, and they're exploiting it. And guess what? They're making money. You remember where we started? Willie Sutton? That's where the money is. Until we can cut off the funding of these ransomware actors, they're just going to keep doing their thing because they want to make money. Now, I'm not naive. I'm not standing before you saying do not pay ransoms, because I understand and appreciate an organization needs to continue to do business. Just know that this is going to continue to happen until we do figure out a way to shut off the funding sources, whether that's after we pay them, the U.S. government reaches in and takes the money back, or we figure out a way to just shut them down, but more groups will happen. They are sophisticated. They're some of the best in the industry. We work them every single day, and we see them. Not only are they trying to social engineer people at your organizations, but they're also trying to break into infrastructure and establish a foothold so they can have persistent access. And the second they know they can get you and they get your attention, you're stuck, and you have to figure out how to navigate that. So ransomware is not going anywhere, and we're all going to be potential victims of it. What is interesting in the Change incident is what I talked about earlier, and it highlights third-party risk. And it's something that just in the last 6 years, 7 years is when really the industry has started to take notice and to really think about what does third-party risk mean. So as you sit there, think about it. What third-party organizations do your business operations rely on? And do you have the right contracts in place to know immediately, should something occur, will you be notified? Have you, an organization, exercised, what happens if our biggest supplier or our biggest pipeline of data or whatever it is to maintain our business operations comes to a screeching halt? Like, what is that? I tell you, when I was in government, we all remember the malicious malware attack on Maersk shipping. Everybody remember that? I was in the White House at the time. And that was actually due to Maersk being caught up in the Russia-Ukrainian war. And I sat down with executives from Maersk, and I said, what did you think occurred? And most people don't know this, but Maersk lost visibility of every single shipping container and shipping vessel in their fleet. Every single. It just went dark, their screens. They had no idea where it went. They had no idea where anything was. And I asked them, I said, well, why didn't you prepare for that? They said, Anthony, we did. We talked about exactly that. We said, it'll never happen because the day we lose visibility like that is the day the world is in a nuclear war. And I said, or Russia attacks Ukraine, and you become a victim of that. Third-party risk. They weren't attacked directly. It was one of their vendors. Change. Change was attacked directly, of course, victim of ransomware, malicious cyber actors, but the cascading effect to all their consumers of their services. It's something you need to take away. If there's anything today, take back to your organization and think about that. Sometimes it's as simple as what happens if the electricity goes out, right? That's a third-party supplier of services to your business operations. What if it's also like, what if we lose this data pipeline? Do we have backup? Can we still function? Is there another way that our business can function for 2 days, 3 days, a week, a month?
Well, I think that's a good place to end. This has been a very sobering discussion, but I think one that will reinforce the need for us to keep this topic and this issue top of mind, both as regulators, and I know the folks in the industry are thinking the same thing. Anthony, you've been incredible, and thank you for bringing your insights and wisdom and expertise to us today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.